Okay, thank you. I'd like to welcome you to This Is How to Reach Niche Decision Makers with Podcasts with Michael Passanante. I have to admit that when I first was putting together the program, somebody said, this guy wants to talk about podcasts, and I said, with all the crazy things happening in media and multimedia and everything, is a podcast session? And I was sort of this new media technology skeptic. And then I started talking to Michael about the science that he's put into this and the results that he's getting from it. And it's just a perfect example that some of the older, tried and true methods with another layer of technology, another layer of data and metrics on it can produce better some of the newfangled stuff. So we immediately asked him to come on the panel. I wish there could be more people here, except for some 2:50 hour here in the afternoon. But he has some really good stuff to say, and he's looking at podcasts in a very creative and data-centric way. So without further ado.
Thank you. As Frank said, my name is Michael Passanante. I'm the Senior Marketing Director at Bestler, where our goal is to protect and enhance revenue for hospitals. You go to bestler.com if you want to understand a little bit more about what we do. Part of what I do there is I host and produce the Hospital Finance Podcast. And so this was a program that came about, and I'll tell you that story in a minute, to help us really create a cornerstone set of content for our company and what we do in marketing. And so, just make sure I have it right. There we go. All right, so I'm going to tell you a little bit about the story today of how this came to be. So we're going to go through the case for podcasting. So this is something that's of interest to you. You're thinking about how this could work in your organization. We'll talk more about that. We'll also talk about how to evaluate the strategic fit. And then if you're still in the tank with me, I'll walk you through sort of my experience of how I put this together and what kinds of considerations you'll have to take into account in terms of the format, engaging stakeholders, production, and then how you can use it to both create content repurposing opportunities, but also distribute that content and grow your overall audience. So if you're like me, great things happen over coffee. And I have to admit, prior to 2014, I don't know that I had listened to a podcast. And I started at Bestler in April 2014. And that June, I was at HFMA's annual meeting in Las Vegas, and I was invited to have a cup of coffee with an advertising rep who wanted to get to know me a little bit better and understand what we do. And I just happened to mention to him that, I have to drive into the office a little more often now. When I do that, it's about an hour. And I'm just trying to think of ways to fill that hour better. And I'm doing audio blogs and different things. He said, well, did you ever listen to podcasts? I said, not really. So he pulled out his iPhone and showed me the podcasts app, and I got intrigued. And I started, downloading them and listening to them on the way to work, all different kinds, different genres. And I started to notice something was going on here. I started to think about how much I was engaged with that content, how often I came back to the people that I liked, and how I built that familiarity and that trust with them in a way that few other things can actually do, or we often do in our space. And so I kind of wanted to put some skills in the bank, and so I started to read up on how do you actually do a podcast. If I wanted to do this, what would this take? And long story short, after some research, we had an opportunity to try podcasts with a campaign that we were doing for product launch. So I did a series just of 6, just to see if I can get anybody to listen to these things, to support the product launch. And it did pretty well. Not fantastic, but pretty well. And what was funny is they continued to perform long after I kind of had left them behind. And so, as we approached 2016, I thought more about this and said, we're still kind of running that race of trying to create content for the blog, and trying to write ebooks, trying to do all these different things. How do we kind of tie all of this up? So we've got this sort of tie, we've got a multi-product portfolio too. So how do we tie all of this up so that we're talking to the marketplace with one voice, and we're creating great content and lots of it to support all of these different areas of our business. And that's how the Hospital Finance Podcast more or less came to be. But let me walk you through some of my thinking around that. So if we back up and just start to look at how you take how the case for this works, right? Mobile has really taken over. As Frank said, podcasts have been around for a while, right? I mean, they're not exactly brand new, shiny digital technology, but what's changed in the past several years is the proliferation of smartphones. I'm trusting everyone here has a smartphone or AI device or something like that, right? I won't ask you to raise your hands because I pretty much know that you do. So, when you think about that, you've got the power of podcasts right in your hand. So if you look at this infinite dial study that I pulled up here, this is their brand new one. If you're familiar with that study, it's a large-scale study. It's not B2B specific, but it looks across usage of all different kinds of media throughout the United States. And they look at podcasts, and they found that 24% of the US population, 12 plus, listened to a podcast in the last month. So it's about 67 million people, is what they estimate. 65% of them listened on their smartphone. Those numbers are both bigger than 2016. So let's continue. In this study by Midroll, which goes back to 2015, which I guess is like an eternity ago now, but if you look at what they came up with, and this was interesting to me, and we'll get more into this in a minute, but think about what people listen to their podcasts, right? They're not necessarily sitting at their desk in the office, right? They're walking, they're running, they're working out, they're in the car. That takes them away. We saw that slide earlier in the day where the guy's in the office, he's got all these things around him, right? He can't focus, he can't concentrate, doesn't want to get your ebook, doesn't have time to listen to your phone call. Think about that. We turn to a LinkedIn study if you want to look more in the B2B sector. It's from October 2016. 35% of the members globally are listening to podcasts. 42% of them, of the members under 35, listen to podcasts. So you're dealing with some pretty big numbers here when you think about the number of people that represents. But the one I keyed on was 44%. 44% of department heads, VPs, owners, and C-suites listen to podcasts. And that's growing because the podcast demographic is actually skewing kind of young these days. So something else to think about. And finally, when you look at sort of the larger statistical idea around this, from Bridge Ratings, you see that the average length of time spent listening to a business podcast was 35 minutes, and they looked across different genres of podcasts. And they also found that business podcasts showed some of the greatest evidence of repeat listenership. So again, we think about audience building and trust building and all those things we want to do, you've got it there. But what's interesting to me, and it might prove out because of who's in the room right now. And this study came out earlier this year from CMI Marketing Props. You're probably familiar with it. Only 12% of B2B marketers said they use podcasting as a content marketing tactic. And that's actually down from, I think, about 23% in 2016. So think about what I just showed you in terms of growth, in terms of numbers, in terms of accessibility. Think of what's being used. And so to me, this is what I saw. What I go back and think about when I was thinking about the Hospital Finance Podcast before it was that and what this could be, I saw open space, right? I saw a way I didn't have to write another ebook and pray someone downloaded it, right? And that wasn't going to go away. But I saw an area as I got onto iTunes and some of these other directories and looked for podcasts in my genre. It was not very much. And so there was a great opportunity there. Again, back to the engagement idea. How many other tactics do we have where someone's going to engage with your marketing material, collateral, whatever it is for half an hour? Really? Accessibility. Again, it sits in your pocket probably right now. It's in front of you. You've got the ability to get to it in your car in a lot of cases. And we'll talk more about that as well. So that's huge, and it gets you out of the office. So that was big for me too. For us, topic deep dives are important. You know, we're all B2B, we're dealing with some sophisticated topics, right? It can get difficult sometimes to just get that into writing and get someone to engage with it at a very technical level and really understand it. But when someone explains it to you and tells you about the story of what happened with X, Y, and Z, it changes the dialogue completely. We're all trying to do audience building, right? This is the audience building machine, right? This is how you build an audience. This is the tactic for doing that. And for me, it gave me a great opportunity to repurpose content. And our marketing department is me and one other person right now. So if I don't repurpose content, I am in big trouble. So I had to think of a way to do that extremely efficiently. And we heard trust a lot today as a theme. People buy from us because of our experts. I think the number 3 view page on our site is our management team page. People come and they want to see who we are, they want to get to know us, and they want to trust us. What better way than to hear their experts tell the story to them? And I can tell you, and I'll jump ahead just a little, I'll tell you, I saw that bear out about a few months in when we went back to A&I in 2016, and we were launching a new product, and someone walked up to our booth and pointed to the badge of someone who was there, named Maria, and she goes, I know you, you're Maria from the podcast. And she wanted to talk to her about the offering. Now, can you set the table any better than that, right? So, let's forge ahead. So if you're thinking about how this might fit into your world, you want to think about the things that I just talked about. Are any of those your goals? Right? If you can check off a few of those, this still might be the right thing for you. Of course, you have to understand what kind of content your audience wants to consume. Everybody is different. So this may or may not work for them. You may have to do some kinds of testing or research, what have you, but certainly you have to understand that, or at least be willing to give it a try. Do you have experts willing to contribute? If you have a content marketing program in place now, hopefully that's a pretty good place for you to start. Although I'll tell you, it's not always easy to put a microphone in front of somebody. So you need to think through that and understand how that might work as well. Do you have the resources? Now I can tell you, again, I do most all of it myself. So you don't have to have an agency or a lot of money or a big team to do this, but you have to understand what your priorities are too, and what your company wants from you. And so you have to evaluate that in your overall look at resources. And you have to decide whether or not you can balance podcasting versus short-term demand generation. I mean, if all you're supposed to do is keep up with the quarterly lead number, podcasting might not be for you, because it is the long game. It is the marathon of content marketing, right? So you have to understand that going in. All right, so if you're with me so far, that's my Van Halen mixtape from high school. I'm just kidding. Probably what I would have put on this slide, as I was thinking about it last night, is I would have put an anchor, not a tape. But I was thinking format at the time. Because your format structure is your anchor. You think about all the cable news programs that we're exposed to these days and all the different television shows that you watch. Think about their formats, right? We'll deal with the first 3 bullets here. Is it a single expert host that's going to talk all the time by themselves, with guests? Are you going to have 2 people? Are you going to have a panel? Is the panel going to interview anybody? What's your editorial policy going to be? Is it going to be just internal folks? Or are you going to have external people come on the show? These are all the decisions you're going to have to make at this point. And what you do is what your audience is going to come to like and respect and want more of. And so you want to make really good, thoughtful decisions around that as you're heading in. Like I said, you want to think about whether or not you want internal versus external guests. That will depend greatly on your editorial policy. For me, I do a mix of both. Why? For 2 reasons. One, I don't have enough internal experts to fuel something every single week in the way that I think it should be done. Also, I think that there's a value in providing a different voice to the podcast, and also we need to deal with topics that we don't necessarily touch as a service. And I'll tell you, our audience really, I think, respects that. They don't get a product pitch from us every week. They understand we're trying to bring value and help them solve their problems. And sometimes that's not always something we have to offer them, but we want to help them do better in what their jobs are. And again, this goes back to the whole trust building idea. You'll want to think about show length. You'll see studies that will say 22 minutes, that's the number. Why? Because that's the average commute. And that's not a bad idea. Some shows are an hour. I've heard some shows that are 5 or 10 minutes. Ours tends to average about 20 minutes long. That's where I try to keep them. I think the biggest thing with show length is you don't want one week for the show to be 5 minutes and the next week for it to be an hour. Because that just creates that inconsistency. Your audience really needs to know what they're going to get from you. That way they can figure out where they're going to put your show in their lives. You want to think about the segments you have. Again, that anchor, that consistency. Am I going to open up and am I going to do a monologue and then I'm going to invite a guest on? Am I going to go just straight to the guest? Are we going to have, what are we going to do on each show that's going to make that show? You want to think about that. And that'll be where your plan as well. And then what is your release schedule going to be? This is not something, and probably all have this instinct as well, because you run blogs and do those kinds of things. You can't just throw a podcast out whenever you want, right? You don't build an audience that way. You have to be on some kind of a schedule. You have to set an expectation. For us, we do it once a week. It's about the schedule I can maintain, and it's enough that allows our audience to engage with us regularly. I know podcasters that do one every day of the year. There are some that do it every couple of weeks. I think once a week is not a bad pattern, but jump inside what's right for you. I won't go too deep into this slide because I'll assume based on today's conversation you're all pretty well versed dealing with subject matter experts, but needless to say, you're going to need your leadership support to get this off the ground. People internally need to know this is important and that they should contribute. That's the same with any content marketing initiative. For me, I approach my best content creators first. Some of them were not comfortable getting in front of a microphone, and that's something we had to walk through and deal with. We were able to get around, get some to do it. Some others didn't feel as good about doing it, and that's okay. But we figured out how to make it work, and we did it not just at the executive level, although they contributed, but we had folks from all throughout the organization adding their voice to the podcast, which I think really helped as well. I developed interview guides for each one. Some people will come in and they just sort of say this is our topic for the day, and they're really good at ad-libbing. For me, because we had some prescribed content we wanted to get across in each one, I make sure we have an interview guide. It's usually 8 to 10 questions, and we kind of do it in the form of Jeopardy, right? What do you want to talk about? And I'll put it into a question, right? And then we back into it that way. And I do that for both my internal and external guests. So everybody knows what they're going to be talking about when they come in. There's no sandbagging, there's no surprises. Everybody knows exactly what they're going to do, what they're going to get. And then, of course, spotlight their contributions. That goes without saying. Podcast production, you could do a couple of hours on this. Needless to say, you really need to decide how you're going to do it and where you're going to do it. For us, we have what I would call a small studio setup. We have a mixer, a couple of pretty nice microphones we spent a couple of bucks on, and we record everything right into my laptop computer using Audacity. That's how we do it in the office. If I'm out at a trade show and I'm going to interview somebody, that's not a practical setup. I bought a portable MP3 recorder. I keep it in my lapel pocket, in my pocket here, in the jacket, and we can put it on the table and have a good discussion and get a pretty nice recording. You can actually do the same thing with your iPhone if you had to, and I've done that too. So there's a lot of ways to go about selecting your equipment, a lot of good articles for that. I'm happy to take that offline with you if you like. But know that you're going to need some way to capture the audio. You're going to need some kind of software to edit and work with the audio. Again, it's not particularly hard to do. You can do audio engineer kinds of things with Audacity. I don't need to do that. Usually I just need to cut out the stuff that didn't work or reduce, put the bumpers on and kind of sweeten it up a little bit. It's not that big a deal, really. Web and audio hosting. Typically, best practice is not to host the audio files on the same web host that you're using for your website. Most of those website hosts are not set up to stream media in that way, and they prefer that you handle it through someone who is set up to do that. Typically, that's going to be like Blueberry or Libsyn or one of those vendors. I use Blueberry because I have a WordPress site, and they have a very nice plugin called PowerPress that enables me to really connect the podcast recordings directly to the blog posts that we make, and it all works very, very nicely. It's like $12 a month. It's not a big deal. So it's not huge investment stuff that you have to get involved in here. And then if you think about your guest recruitment, particularly for external guests, I have a template made up, switch a few variables around, out the door. It's like anything else. You get you don't get 100% hit rate on your invitations, but you want to have a way that you can kind of keep that routine going because I have to push out 52 shows a year, so. You have to figure out a way to make it work for you. Just some best practices that I've noticed as well along the way. Get some transcripts done. Get them done every single episode. That's great content, whether you turn that into ebooks or, in my case, we post it straight up to the blog with the recordings, because some people just like to read it. There's a lot of ways you can do that. I use a firm called PodScribes in the Philippines. It's a small outfit. I deal with them personally on every episode. Literally, episodes are like $5 to $10. to get them transcribed. It's ridiculously cheap. Get them done. Document your workflow for those first couple of podcasts that you do, because there really are quite a few steps. That's really where you can trip things up in the setup along the way. None of them are hard, but if you don't do them, you might not get the end product that you want to do. So once you've figured out your process for doing it soup to nuts, just create some check boxes and get it all down. Make sure you have some content on the shelf that's evergreen, that you can use whenever you need it, because I can guarantee you at one point in time you will hit a hole in your schedule, and you'll want to pull that off the shelf and slide it in place. So for me, what I like to do is with my subject matter experts is I always try to encourage them to record 2 or 3 episodes at a time with me. It's a good way for them to invest their time, because they can sit and create the content they need for a few episodes, and not have to talk to me again about it for a while, which is pretty nice for them, I bet. But it also enables me to be extremely efficient, because I can sit, I can record, I can knock a bunch out, I can get them edited, have them waiting and ready to go, and schedule them out well ahead of time, so that when I'm not in the office, I'm traveling like this, I have shows going out the live, I don't have to worry about pressing buttons and doing things. So make sure that you do that. And plan ahead to repurpose. So let's talk about that just in a little bit more depth, because I think it's worth diving into. So how are you going to repurpose? Well, the first thing you can do is take a look at what you've already got on the shelf. That's what I did when we started the show. What do I already have? What are the books I have? What are the white papers I have? How can I cut them up and make them work for the podcast? What segments might they be made into that could be individual shows? Going forward, though, what we were able to do is plot it a little bit more strategically. So I'll give you an example. At the beginning of this year, we're still in the middle of launching a new product. We had some themes we wanted to talk about. We got together with the service line director. We decided that it'd be best to handle that in one package as an ebook. But what we did is we looked at it and said, how do we create podcasts from that? So we set it up so that it was going to have, I believe it was 7 distinct sections that would each give themselves over to a podcast, essentially. And that gave us 7 podcasts on top of that one ebook. And now there's interplay, right? Because every time I send out an email about the ebook, I can follow it up with some nurturing emails about the podcast. Every time I have a podcast episode, at the end I can say, come get the ebook. And you've got some interplay going on, which really creates some great, it's really additive to what you're trying to do with your content and your message in terms of getting it out there. You can go the other way. You can record podcasts and, like I said, get transcripts done and things, and then create assets from those. I found that to be a little bit harder, only because you're working backwards into something and using sort of that raw conversational material to try to get what you need and create maybe a print asset out of it or something else. But you can do it that way. And again, what else does your audience care about? So in my case, it's what else is going on in the hospital finance space that maybe we're not dealing with, that we could have an outside expert on and talk about for an episode here and there, that would help round the show out, help give them additional value that I alone can't give them. Distribution. This is one of the great things I think about podcasting is you're not limited to the email channel. You all know how frustrating it is to create your ebook and get it all done and load it up and make the email and you send it out and it's like 2% response rate. Great. Okay. And if you downloads, great. Okay. And you deal with that. It's just part of the game that we play. But here, you're outside of that whole ecosystem, right? So you have the RSS feed, and yes, I create a blog post for every podcast we do. I have the transcript there. I have links to other resources, links to things that the interviewee talked about. So it's a very rich piece of content right there on our website. But you can go outside of that, onto Apple Podcasts, which is kind of the rebranded iTunes idea. It's the biggest podcast search engine on the planet, reaches millions of people, and it's free. You can put your podcast on there for nothing. It creates not only discoverability, but it gives you another place to send people to. They can go and get that content and maybe some other related content. Likewise, Stitcher, Google Play Music, all free. All free distribution, all available on iPhones, Android devices, what have you. So when I look at my statistics, I kind of look at things almost in half, right? I've got everything that happened on the website and all of that growth. And I've got all things going on over here with the podcast and all of that growth. And yes, there's absolutely interplay. But I kind of feel like I've kind of doubled my power, if you will, by going outside of the conventional channel. And you have SoundCloud as well. It's a bit of a different animal. It's a very inexpensive subscription. You can load your MP3 files right up to it. Actually creates very nice social media posts from SoundCloud that people can listen to. A great way to do that as well. Some people prefer that app. So how do you grow this? Well, again, I would submit to you that organic growth is already happening with the proliferation of smartphones and all of these apps. You're seeing the podcast listenership group growing younger and coming up. Right now, there's, I believe, 200 models of vehicles that have Apple CarPlay in them. I didn't know there was that many until I looked up. And there's actually some Android, likewise Android apps, I suppose you could say, that are available in vehicles as well. And that's something that's, for new car models coming out, it's just going to be there in the years ahead. So again, you've got people that are not in their office, they're not, they're driving, but they're not distracted by all the other things that we deal with in an office environment when they're at work. So that's going to provide some organic growth. But then beyond that, what can you do? Well, you're engaging socially. Here is another piece of content you can put out. It can be educational. It's longer form. It's interesting. You can use those social channels to activate and drive traffic to the podcast. Likewise, work your list, your current audience, emails, all the different things that you do. The podcast just folds into all of that nicely and becomes a part of what you do. And so when you add all that together, you really can create a great ecosystem for that content. And I'll just share with you quickly my results. So we started from nothing in February of 2016. Up through April, we were knocking at the door of about 4,000 downloads a month of our podcast. In May, we surpassed that. We got to 4,175. So every single month, it kind of grows a little bit more. Sometimes it levels off, and then it seems to pick up again. I wish I could explain exactly when the pickups happen, but when they happen happen big. I have a feeling it has to do with the way the iTunes algorithms work and how they actually show your show to people. I like to think some of it comes from our own promotion as well, and word of mouth and all of those things. But we see continued growth. For me, at a firm our size, 4,000 downloads of anything a month is really, really good. You may think differently depending on your scale, but coming from an environment where there's like one white paper made out of Microsoft Word when I got there, having this available as a tool and an ecosystem each and every month to give us a voice in the marketplace, in a different place than everyone else is delivering it, it's a huge advantage for us. It's a big differentiator. And I'll give you just some anecdotal results as well. So these are the things that you like to hear over time. At least I do. I don't know. I think you will too. So when your CEO goes to a show and a prospect says, "Man, you have a great podcast. Boy, do I appreciate that." CEO likes that, right? That's pretty good. That's a pretty good result. We had another group that was out at a major conference, and there was one of the big four firms was out there talking about a topic that we're involved in as a niche player. And they said, "Man, Bachelor is the only company out there that's really talking about this topic." They're referring to our podcast because that's what we were talking about. So it's creating recognition among our peer groups as well, which creates a lot of potential relationships and whatnot. I've gotten LinkedIn invitations where people tell me how great the podcast is and they love it. Who likes love from sales, right? How hard is that to get sometimes? It's great when your sales VP starts sending in messages and says, "Man, Mark, this is great. Thanks for," we got so many positive comments when we were at our joint symposium last week. This was great. Podcast really helped out there. The last quote there is from the customer that we had on the show. And they said, "Thanks again for the opportunity. It was fun. If there's anything else we can do, we can do it again. That'd be great. Love to come back on the show." I'll tell you, a lot of times, most of the time, people say, this was a lot of fun, this wasn't as bad as I thought. I'd like to come back on. What can I come back on and talk about? That's great. And I can tell you, this customer, I'm on LinkedIn with them. I see them sharing podcast posts now. I see them commenting on things within forums. So now they're a more engaged customer as well. So you're delivering on your content promise in a variety of different ways. Not only are you generating potential demand, but you're continuing to engage with your current customers. Now I'll tell you, it can be difficult to derive pipeline numbers out of your podcast, right? It's not always easy to do. It's not always easy to track back the sale to it. Although, if someone visits the website, goes to a podcast post on our site, and they're in HubSpot, Salesforce, all those things that we use to track, you can tell they're engaging with you. But the podcast audience is a bit late. You hear these kinds of comments when they see you in person and they show up. They don't always raise their hand, but they're there. So you have to kind of take a little bit of a leap of faith away from what we're faced with now in terms of a metric-driven environment and understand where the audience is going and what this can and can't do for you to really aid in your content marketing and your overall program. So that is my presentation. I blog at launchcatalyst.net if you want to get in touch with me or read anything more. I also have I wrote a short book about this. It's actually on Amazon for free this week if you want it, if you want to dig into more of these details. It's called the B2B Podcasting Playbook. Just hop up there and download it on your Kindle or your iPad or whatever you use. You're welcome to do that, and hopefully you'll find some information